Shabbos. This week's portion is Va'era, and the parsha starts off with somewhat of a problematic passage. God speaks to Moshe, and he says, Ani Hashem, I am God, but of course he uses the four-letter name of God, which is specific to the Jewish God of the Torah, rather than the God of the nations of the world. And then he says, I have appeared to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, to the forefathers, Be'el Shaddai. And he uses another name of God, Ushmi Hashem or Shmi Adonai lo nadati lehem, but the name, four-letter name of God, I have not let them know. And of course, this is problematic because anyone who's read Bereshis, if you've read anything in the first book of the Torah, you know that God does speak to them with the name of Yud Hey Vav Hey, of the four-letter name of God. So there are many different approaches to this. The Ramban Nachmanides says the following, that what it really means is that when Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov saw God, or talked to God, or understood God, they didn't understand him or apprehend God in the way that Moshe does. And that not only that, but that the miracles that occurred to them didn't occur to them as miracles which are beyond nature, but rather within nature. In other words, their relationship to God was more, I don't want to say closer to us, because of course Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are completely on a different level, but everything was within nature. If you saw a miracle, if Avram was saved by a miracle, for example, as we're told by the Medrash in the beginning of the story of Avram, that he was confronted by the king for breaking the idols, and he was saved by a miracle. There's two versions of that miracle. One version is that he was thrown into a furnace and saved. That's the one which is more popular and remembered by everyone. But Nachmanides says, according to this understanding, that medrash we have to just disregard. And actually, maybe if he was saved, he was in prison and he escaped from prison, but not some kind of miracle where he actually escaped a furnace or a fire, which would obviously kill him if not from some supernatural event. But Moshe had supernatural events occur. So another discussion is necessary for the miracles of Moshe and how we understand miracles within our philosophy or theology. But what's important, I think, here is the downplaying of miracles for everyone except for Moshe. What this does is tells us that our religion and our belief should not necessarily be relying on the fact that we had miracles. Now, again, when you read the book of Shemos and all the things that happened to Moshe and the things that God said to Moshe about why people will believe in him, that's somewhat problematic. But what it's really saying is, if we understand that these are unbelievable miracles, that are supernatural miracles, they are something which happens, it's a one-off. It happened in the time of Moshe. It happened for Moshe. It happened at a specific point in history. But that's not how we guide our lives. We're now thousands of years away from that. And the way to approach God is not by saying we're waiting for a miracle. Or did you hear what happened? There's a miracle. That's somewhat superstitious belief. That's the way that people believed in Avodah Zarah, in idolatry. It's all something which does not make sense. The Jewish approach, according to this understanding, is that within Judaism, once the Torah is established, for sure, according to Nachmanides, we have to understand that our relationship with God is within nature, which changes the way we think and the way we act. We have to make sure that we act responsibly and don't expect things out of the ordinary. When I say out of the ordinary, I mean here supernatural, from God to either save us or to afflict our enemies. We have to work within nature. And it just changes the nature of the way we serve God, the way we believe in God, and the way we act in our day-to-day lives. And I think it's very important. Maimonides has a long discussion in a letter, a very famous letter he wrote about resurrection, about the nature of miracles. And I believe if you read that carefully, he downplays miracles even more, because the Rambam, Maimonides, was a rationalist philosopher, and to him, the notion of God and our understanding of God should not be dependent on that at all. Ramban Nachmanides, who I quoted earlier, he's a Kabbalist, and therefore he has a different worldview, and I think it's even more striking that even Nachmanides is saying this, that except for the Moshe, except for that one exception, that's not the way we approach God. That's not what we understand God. And we shouldn't have these expectations. And I think it changes the nature of everything that we do. And it's important because a lot of popular religion today does rely on the belief in miracles and somewhat superstitious belief. And I think we have to move away from that and go back to sort of the roots of what some of these commentaries said hundreds of years ago. And it did not necessarily have they did not necessarily have a problem in having a strong belief in God and a relationship with God and accepting of the Torah. And I believe neither should we. Good Shabbos.